The rain hammered against the Brooklyn brownstone like 1,000 desperate fingers begging for shelter, and through it all, Marcus heard the smallest voice he'd ever encountered say words that would shatter his carefully rebuilt life into pieces. "Mommy's afraid." Marcus Chen froze halfway through closing his front door, his hand still gripping the brass knob that had been in his family for 3 generations. The autumn wind carried the scent of wet asphalt and something else, something that made his throat tighten with recognition. The unmistakable smell of desperation, of bodies that hadn't seen warmth in too long. He should have closed the door. God knows. In this neighborhood, in this city where everyone walked past everyone else's pain with practiced indifference, the smart thing would have been to pretend he hadn't heard anything at all. But Marcus had never been particularly smart about other people suffering. His late wife Sarah used to say it was his greatest weakness and his most beautiful flaw, that he saw people, really saw them, when the rest of the world had trained itself to look away. The small figure stood at the bottom of his stoop, barely visible through the sheets of rain that turned Park Slope's elegant streets into rivers of reflected streetlights. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, with tangled blonde hair plastered against a face so pale it seemed almost translucent in the October darkness. Her purple jacket, too thin for the weather, stained with dirt and time, hung on her small frame like a borrowed coat from someone else's life. Marcus's heart clenched with a pain he recognized too well. It was the same pain he'd felt 18 months ago when he'd held Sarah's hand in that sterile hospital room and watched the monitors flatline, taking with them every plan they'd made, every future they'd imagined. "What did you say?" His voice came out rougher than he intended, scraped raw by the cold air and something deeper, something that lived in the hollow places grief creates. The girl's eyes, impossibly large and filled with a fear no child should ever know, met his. "Mommy's afraid," she repeated, her small voice trembling like a leaf in a storm. "She's afraid of the bad man who yells. She's afraid we'll freeze. She's afraid I'll get sick again." Marcus stepped out onto the stoop, rain immediately soaking through his grey sweater, the one Sarah had given him for his 32nd birthday. Below him, the girl didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there with water streaming down her face, mixing with what might have been tears or might have just been the merciless October downpour. "Where is your mother?" Marcus asked, scanning the darkening street. The brownstones of Park Slope lined both sides like silent witnesses, their warm windows glowing with the lives of people who had roofs and heat and Friday night dinners. People who weren't standing in the rain, talking to a child who looked like she'd been living rough for weeks. The girl pointed with a small, trembling finger toward the bus stop at the corner of 7th Avenue. There, hunched on the bench under the inadequate shelter, sat a woman who looked like she'd aged a decade for every year she'd lived. Even from this distance, Marcus could see the exhaustion etched into every line of her body. The way she held herself as if staying upright required every ounce of strength she possessed. "We've been walking all day," the girl continued, her words coming faster now, as if she'd been saving them up and finally found someone who might listen. "Mommy said we had to leave the shelter because the man there, he kept looking at me funny. She said better cold than scared. But then it started raining, and Mommy's cough got worse, and she said we should find a nice street, a safe street, and maybe someone would help." Marcus felt something crack open inside his chest. He'd spent 18 months building walls around his heart, brick by brick, protecting himself from feeling too much, from letting anyone else's pain touch the raw wounds that Sarah's death had left behind. He'd become an expert at walking past homeless people with the practiced blindness of every other New Yorker, at telling himself that one person couldn't fix systemic problems, that his grief had earned him the right to look away. But this child standing in the rain with her mother's fear weighing on her small shoulders like an anchor, had just demolished every wall he'd built. "What's your name?" Marcus asked, descending 2 steps, bringing himself closer to her level. "Emma." The girl wrapped her arms around herself, shivering so hard her teeth chattered. "Emma Rose Mitchell. I'm 7 3/4. Mummy says the 3/4 are important because every bit of growing up counts when you're trying to be brave." Something in Marcus's throat threatened to close completely. 7 3/4. The same age his daughter would have been if Sarah's pregnancy hadn't ended in that devastating miscarriage 5 years ago, if their dreams of becoming parents hadn't died before they'd even begun. "Emma Rose Mitchell," Marcus repeated slowly, tasting each syllable, making it real, making her real in a way that meant he couldn't unsee her, couldn't walk away. "That's a beautiful name. I'm Marcus. Marcus Chen." "Are you Chinese?" Emma asked with the directness only children possess. "We had a neighbor in our old apartment who was Chinese. Mrs. Wu. She used to give me dumplings when Mommy had to work late. That was before we lost our apartment, before everything got bad." "My father was Chinese," Marcus said, his mind racing through options, through the logistics of what he was about to do, through all the reasons this was a terrible idea, and the one reason, standing right in front of him, shivering in the rain, why it didn't matter. "My mother was Irish." "Emma, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Can you do that?" The girl nodded, her eyes never leaving his face. "I'm going to help you and your mother, but first, I need you to go back to her and tell her that I'm inviting you both inside to get dry and warm. Can you tell her that a man named Marcus Chen, who lives at 342 Union Street, wants to help, but only if she's comfortable? I won't be offended if she says no. I know trust is hard. But I promise you, Emma Rose Mitchell, I promise you on everything I hold sacred, that I only want to help." Emma stared at him for a long moment, and in her eyes, Marcus saw a wisdom that childhood should never grant, the wisdom of survival, of having to judge whether adults were safe or dangerous, of carrying burdens that should have belonged to someone else. "Okay," she finally whispered, "but Mr. Chen, please don't be mean to Mommy if she cries." "She cries a lot now, but she's still the best mommy in the world. She just got unlucky, that's all. We both got unlucky." The girl turned and ran back to the bus stop, her small form barely visible through the rain. Marcus watched as she reached the woman on the bench, watched as the mother's head snapped up in alarm, watched as Emma's small hands gesticulated back toward the brownstone, explaining, pleading. Marcus's hands trembled as he gripped the iron railing of his stoop. He'd been a high school teacher for 10 years before Sarah died. He'd taught English literature to teenagers who thought Shakespeare was boring and poetry was pointless. He'd learned to read people, to see past their defenses to the fear and hope underneath. But this was different. This wasn't about teaching metaphors or explaining iambic pentameter. This was about 2 human beings standing in the rain with nowhere to go and winter coming fast. This was about choosing to see suffering instead of walking away from it. This was about being the person Sarah had always believed he was, even when he wasn't sure he believed it himself. The woman stood slowly, painfully, as if every joint in her body protested the movement. Even from this distance, Marcus could see her hand clutching Emma's shoulder, protective and desperate all at once. They moved toward him, like wounded animals approaching something that might be safety or might be another trap. They'd learned the hard way that kindness could be a disguise for cruelty. As they reached the bottom of his stoop, Marcus got his first clear look at Emma's mother. She was younger than he'd initially thought, probably early 30s, with blonde hair darker than her daughter's, and eyes that carried the exhausted wariness of someone who'd been fighting battles on every front and losing ground inch by inch. Her clothes were as worn as Emma's, and the cough that Emma had mentioned revealed itself in the way the woman's shoulders shook with each breath. "I'm Sarah," the woman said, and Marcus felt the universe tilt sideways. Of all the names in all the world, she had to share his late wife's name. "Sarah Mitchell. Emma says you offered help. We don't want charity. I just need to get out of the rain for a bit. Maybe let Emma warm up. We'll be gone as soon as the rain stops." Marcus shook his head slowly. "The rain isn't stopping tonight. Weather report says it'll go until morning. And I'm not offering charity, Sarah. I'm offering human decency, which should be the bare minimum, but apparently isn't anymore." He stepped back, opening his door wider. "Please, both of you, come inside. Get dry, get warm, and then we'll figure out what comes next. No obligations, no strings. Just please don't make your daughter stand in the rain when there's a warm house right here." Sarah Mitchell's eyes filled with tears that had nothing to do with the rain. Her hand tightened on Emma's shoulder. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you help us? You don't know us. We could be anyone." Marcus thought of all the pat answers he could give, because it's the right thing to do, because everyone deserves help, because no child should be cold and afraid. But what came out was the raw truth, scraped from the wounded places in his soul. Because 18 months ago, my wife died, and the world suddenly seemed full of people who looked away from pain. I became one of them. And I'm tired, Sarah. I'm so damn tired of looking away. So please, for both our sakes, come inside." The two Sarahs, one living, one memory, seemed to merge in that moment, creating something Marcus couldn't quite name. A second chance, a cosmic joke, a test he didn't want to fail. Sarah Mitchell looked down at her daughter, at Emma's pleading eyes, at the way her small body shook with cold. When she looked back up at Marcus, something had shifted in her expression, not trust exactly, but the desperate willingness to take a calculated risk. "Okay," she said quietly, "okay. But just until the rain stops, just until Emma's warm." Marcus nodded, knowing it was a lie they both needed to tell. The rain might stop, but what Emma and Sarah Mitchell needed wouldn't be solved in a single night. As they climbed his stoop, water dripping from their clothes onto the old stone steps his great-grandfather had laid in 1952, Marcus wondered if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life, or if he'd finally done something that mattered since Sarah, his Sarah, had left this world. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded in the quiet that followed, like the first note of a song whose melody Marcus didn't yet know, but whose rhythm felt achingly, dangerously familiar. Emma looked up at him with those impossibly large eyes and smiled, a real smile, the first he'd seen, and Marcus felt the last of his carefully constructed walls crumble into dust. The warmth of Marcus's brownstone hit them like a physical embrace, and Emma gasped as if she'd forgotten what heat felt like against her skin. Marcus watched as the little girl stood frozen in his entryway, water pooling around her worn sneakers on the hardwood floor his grandfather had installed in 1978. Her eyes, still impossibly large, took in everything with the hungry awareness of someone who'd learned that safety was temporary and comfort was a luxury that could vanish in a heartbeat. The house still carried traces of Sarah Chen's presence, even after 18 months. The gallery wall of black and white photographs she'd curated. The bookshelf organized by color because she'd claimed it made the world more beautiful. The faint scent of her favorite lavender candles that Marcus couldn't bring himself to throw away or light. "Bathrooms upstairs, first door on the left," Marcus said, his voice gentler than it had been in months. "There are clean towels in the cabinet. Take as long as you need. Get out of those wet clothes." He paused, reality crashing in. "I don't have anything that would fit either of you, but I can throw your clothes in the dryer while you shower. I'll leave some of my t-shirts and sweatpants outside the door. They'll be huge, but they'll be warm and dry." Sarah Mitchell hadn't moved from the doorway. Her arms wrapped around herself in a gesture Marcus recognized, the body language of someone trying to hold themselves together against impossible odds. Her cough erupted again, wet and rattling, the kind of cough that spoke of nights spent in the cold and lungs that had forgotten what it meant to breathe easily. "I can't accept this," Sarah whispered, but her eyes betrayed her, flickering toward the stairs, toward the promise of warmth and clean water. "We shouldn't be here. This is too much." "We're strangers." Emma's small hand found her mother's, squeezing tight. "Mommy, please, I'm so cold, and you promised we'd accept help if someone safe offered. You said that's not giving up. That's being smart." Marcus saw the moment Sarah Mitchell's resolve crumbled. It was there in the way her shoulders sagged, in the tears that finally spilled over and mixed with the rainwater still dripping from her hair, in the desperate love that made her willing to trust a stranger because her daughter's needs outweighed her pride. "Okay," Sarah breathed. "Okay, baby, we'll stay tonight, just tonight." Marcus nodded, not pointing out the lie they all knew it was. Instead, he moved toward the kitchen. "I'll make something warm to drink." "Tea? Hot chocolate? Hot chocolate!" Emma's voice came alive for the first time, a glimpse of the child she might have been if life hadn't forced her to grow up too fast. "Mommy, can I have hot chocolate? Please." Sarah's smile was broken but genuine. "Yes, sweetheart, you can have hot chocolate." As they climbed the stairs, Emma practically running toward the bathroom while Sarah moved slower, each step seeming to cost her something, Marcus stood in his kitchen and wondered what the hell he was doing. His rational mind catalogued all the reasons this was insane. They were strangers. He knew nothing about them. There were systems in place for situations like this, proper channels, social services. But his heart, the part of him that had been frozen since his wife's death, whispered something different. It whispered that systems failed, that proper channels had cracks wide enough for people to fall through, that sometimes the only thing standing between a child and catastrophe was one person willing to open a door when the world had closed all the others. He pulled out his wife's favorite pot, the blue enamel one she'd bought at a flea market in Vermont, and started heating milk for hot chocolate, real hot chocolate, the kind his mother used to make, with cocoa powder and sugar and a pinch of cinnamon. Not the instant packet stuff. These two deserved something real. 20 minutes later, Emma appeared at the bottom of the stairs, swimming in one of Marcus's old Columbia University t-shirts that hung to her knees. Her hair, now clean and drying, revealed itself as a lighter blonde than he'd first thought, and her face, scrubbed free of dirt and grime, showed features that were delicate and fine-boned. She looked younger now, more vulnerable, and Marcus felt a fierce protectiveness surge through him that he hadn't felt since he'd lost his own chance at fatherhood. "Mr. Chen?" Emma's voice was small. "Mummy's crying in the shower. She told me to come down here, but I don't want to leave her alone when she cries." Marcus's heart clenched. He knelt down to Emma's level, this small human who carried weights no child should bear. "Sometimes grown-ups need to cry, Emma. Sometimes crying is how we let out all the sad and scared feelings so we can make room for other things. Your mom's safe up there. The water's warm. She's in a locked bathroom where nothing bad can reach her. That's probably the first time in a while she's had a moment where she could let herself feel everything, isn't it?" Emma nodded slowly, her eyes, old eyes in a young face, studying him with an intensity that felt like being seen straight through to his bones. "Are you a sad grown-up too, Mr. Chen? This house feels like sadness lives here. Not mean sadness, but the kind that's missing something." The observation hit Marcus like a physical blow. He sat back on his heels, stunned by this child's perception, by the way she'd named something he'd been trying to hide from himself for 18 months. "Yeah," he admitted quietly. Yeah, Emma, I'm a sad grown-up too. My wife died. Sarah. Her name was Sarah, just like your mom's name, and ever since she died, I've been living in this house, but not really living, you know. Just existing, going through the motions. Emma reached out and patted his hand with her small one, a gesture so tender and knowing that Marcus felt his eyes burn with tears he'd been holding back since the funeral. "That's okay," Emma said solemnly. "Mommy says it's okay to be sad when you lose someone. She says we're not broken, just hurt, and hurt things can heal if they have time and help." She paused, tilting her head. "Maybe you need help too. Maybe that's why we found your house tonight. Maybe we're supposed to help each other." Marcus couldn't speak. He pulled Emma into a gentle hug, this small philosopher in an oversized t-shirt, and she hugged him back with the fierce grip of someone who understood that sometimes strangers could become lifelines. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made them both look up. Sarah Mitchell descended slowly, wearing Marcus's old NYU sweatpants rolled up multiple times and a grey Henley that hung loose on her thin frame. Her hair was wet but clean, and without the layers of dirt and exhaustion, Marcus could see that she was striking, not beautiful in a conventional sense, but striking in the way that survival carved character into faces and made eyes deeper. "Emma Rose Mitchell," Sarah said, her voice carrying a forced lightness. "Did you introduce yourself properly to Mr. Chen?" "Yes, Mommy. I told him my whole name with the 3/4 and everything." Sarah's smile was watery but real. When her eyes met Marcus's, he saw a universe of gratitude and shame warring there. Grateful for the help, but ashamed that she needed it. Grateful for the warmth, but ashamed that she couldn't provide it herself. "The hot chocolate's ready," Marcus said, breaking the moment before it could become too heavy. "And I made grilled cheese sandwiches. Nothing fancy, just comfort food. When's the last time you two ate?" Emma's eyes lit up at the mention of food. Sarah's hand went to her daughter's shoulder, and Marcus saw the lie forming before she spoke it. "We ate earlier." "Mommy, we had that old bagel from the bakery trash this morning," Emma interrupted with the brutal honesty of children. "And you gave me most of it." Sarah's face flushed red, and Marcus saw her walls slam back up, saw the defensive pride of someone who'd been judged too many times. "Hey," Marcus said quickly, moving to the stove. "No judgment here. We're just people eating food together on a rainy night, that's it. Nothing more complicated than that." They sat at Marcus's kitchen table, the same table where he and his wife had eaten countless dinners, where they'd planned their future and dreamed their dreams. Emma devoured her grilled cheese with the single-minded focus of genuine hunger, while Sarah picked at hers, her eyes constantly flickering to her daughter as if to make sure this wasn't a dream that would vanish. "Emma mentioned you had an apartment before," Marcus said carefully, keeping his tone conversational, non-threatening. "What happened, if you don't mind me asking?" Sarah was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat, emotionless, the tone of someone reciting facts too painful to feel. "I was a paralegal. Good job, decent salary. Emma's father left when she was 2. He didn't want the responsibility, said he was too young to be tied down. But we were fine. I was making it work." She paused, her hands wrapping around her mug of hot chocolate like it was an anchor. "Then I got sick. Really sick. Some kind of infection that turned into pneumonia. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. Lost my job because I'd already used up my sick days taking care of Emma when she had the flu. No job meant no insurance. Hospital bills piled up, then rent, then everything just cascaded." Marcus listened, his own mug forgotten, watching Emma's small hand creep across the table to hold her mother's. "We stayed with my sister for a while," Sarah continued, her voice cracking now. "But her husband didn't want us there, said we were taking advantage. We went to a shelter, but Emma—" Her voice broke completely. There was a man there who looked at Emma in a way that made my skin crawl. I couldn't risk it, so we left. We've been on the streets for 3 weeks now, sleeping in train stations when we can, bus stops when we can't. I've been trying to save enough for a security deposit on a new apartment, but when you're homeless, every dollar goes to food or keeping warm. You can't get ahead, you just survive day to day. 3 weeks, Marcus repeated, looking at Emma, imagining this child sleeping on train platforms, begging for change, watching her mother deteriorate. Emma, you've been so brave. Mommy's braver, Emma said firmly. She gave me her coat last week when it got really cold. She pretended she wasn't freezing, but I knew. Mommy always takes care of me first. Sarah's tears fell silently now, and Marcus saw in them every failure of a system that should have protected them, every door that had closed, every person who'd looked away. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus said, his voice steady even as his heart raced with the enormity of what he was about to commit to. You're both staying here tonight. Tomorrow, we're going to take Sarah to a doctor to check that cough. Then we're going to figure out the next steps. I have a guest room that hasn't been used since my wife died. It's yours for as long as you need it. No, Sarah said immediately, shaking her head. We can't. You don't understand. Once you let people like us in, we become your problem. I won't do that to you. People like you? Marcus's voice was sharper than he intended. You mean people who got dealt a shit hand and are doing everything they can to protect their kid? Those kind of people. People who have nothing, Sarah whispered. People who can't pay you back. People who... I don't want to be paid back, Marcus interrupted. I want to help, because help is what you need, and help is what I can give. My wife used to say that we're all just walking each other home. She died believing that people were fundamentally good, that we're supposed to take care of each other. I stopped believing that when she died. But tonight, Emma found my door out of all the doors on this street, and I think maybe that means something. Emma looked between them, her old young eyes, understanding more than she should. Mommy, please. I like it here. It's warm and Mr. Chen is nice, and I'm tired of being afraid all the time. Sarah closed her eyes, and Marcus watched her last defenses crumble. When she opened them again, they were full of tears and surrender and the desperate hope of someone who'd stopped believing in miracles. Just a few days, she whispered, until I can get back on my feet. I promise we won't be a burden. Marcus nodded, knowing it was another lie, knowing that a few days wouldn't be enough to fix what systemic failure had broken. But it was a start. That night, after Sarah and Emma had gone upstairs to the guest room, Emma, clutching a stuffed bear that had belonged to Sarah Chen, given freely because grief shared is grief lessened, Marcus sat in his living room and looked at his wife's photograph on the mantel. I don't know what I'm doing, Sarah, he whispered to the image, but I think maybe you sent them here. Maybe this is you, telling me to start living again, to see people again, to be the person you always believed I was. The house was quiet, except for the rain still falling outside, and the faint sound of Emma's voice upstairs, telling her mother a story about a princess who lived in a brownstone, and was saved by a sad man who needed saving too. Marcus smiled, the first real smile in 18 months, and thought that maybe, just maybe, they were all saving each other. 3 months had passed since that rainy October night, and Marcus Chen's brownstone had transformed from a mausoleum of grief into something he'd stopped believing was possible, a home filled with life again. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows, catching the dust particles that danced in the light like tiny stars. Marcus stood at the stove making pancakes, not just any pancakes, but the elaborate Mickey Mouse-shaped ones that Emma had shyly requested last week, claiming she'd only ever seen them in movies. Mr. Chen, you made the ears too big. Emma's voice carried from the doorway, but it was different now, lighter, filled with the teasing confidence of a child who knew she was safe, who knew that laughter was allowed, who knew that tomorrow would come and would be okay. Marcus turned, brandishing his spatula like a sword. "Too big? These are architecturally perfect mouse ears. I'll have you know. I'll have you know I have a degree in pancake engineering." Emma giggled, a sound that still caught Marcus by surprise with its pure, unguarded joy. She'd grown in 3 months, not just physically but in ways that were harder to measure. The shadows under her eyes had faded. The wariness in her posture had softened. She moved through the house now like she belonged there, because she did. "Mommy says there's no such thing as pancake engineering," Emma declared, climbing onto her usual chair at the table. She wore new clothes now, jeans that actually fit, a purple sweater that Sarah had bought with her first paycheck, sneakers that weren't held together with duct tape and hope. "Your mommy is a woman of science and facts," Marcus countered, "but I am a man of breakfast and imagination. We must agree to disagree." Sarah appeared in the doorway, and Marcus's breath caught the way it had been catching for weeks now, a response he wasn't quite ready to name or acknowledge. She looked different too. The gauntness had left her face, replaced by colour and health. Her hair was longer, pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger, closer to her actual 33 years. She'd been working as a paralegal again for 6 weeks now, at a firm that actually valued her skills and offered health insurance from day one. But it was more than physical changes. There was something in the way she moved through the world now, less defensive, less ready for the next disaster. She smiled more. She laughed at Marcus's terrible jokes. She'd stopped apologizing for taking up space. "Breakfast smells amazing," Sarah said, and Marcus noticed the way her eyes met his and held, the way something electric seemed to pass between them in those moments. "You're going to spoil us." "That's the plan," Marcus replied, plating the pancakes with a flourish. "Total and complete spoilage. It's in my contract." "We don't have a contract," Emma pointed out with the literal mindedness of 8-year-olds. She'd turned 8 last month, and they'd celebrated with a party that included neighbours and Emma's new friends from school, and a cake that Marcus had attempted to bake himself with catastrophic but hilarious results. "Invisible contract," Marcus said seriously, "written in pancake batter and syrup, legally binding in all 50 states. They ate breakfast together, the 3 of them, in a routine that had become sacred. Emma chattered about her upcoming school play. She'd been cast as a tree, which she insisted was the most important role, because without trees, where would the forest be? Sarah shared a story about a case she was working on, and Marcus listened, watching the way her hands moved when she talked, the way her whole face lit up when she was passionate about something. After breakfast, Sarah helped Emma pack her backpack for school, while Marcus cleaned the kitchen. Through the window, he could see the same Brooklyn street where Emma had stood 3 months ago in the rain. The leaves had all fallen now, and the December cold had settled in with the promise of snow. But inside this house, spring seemed to bloom eternal. "Marcus?" Sarah's voice was soft behind him. He turned to find her standing in the kitchen doorway, Emma already gone upstairs to brush her teeth. "Can we talk? Before you drive Emma to school?" His heart rate picked up. They'd been dancing around something for weeks now. Stolen glances, accidental touches that lingered too long, conversations that went deeper than practical matters, but neither had been brave enough to name it, to risk the fragile ecosystem they'd built. "Of course," Marcus said, drying his hands on a dish towel. "Everything okay?" Sarah moved to the kitchen table, sitting in what had become her chair, and Marcus joined her. The morning light caught the gold in her hair, and he thought about how beautiful she was. Not despite the hardship she'd endured, but somehow because of it. She'd been forged in fire and emerged stronger. "I got a call yesterday," Sarah began, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug. "From a landlord in Prospect Heights. There's an apartment available. 2 bedrooms, reasonable rent, safe neighborhood. With my salary now, I can afford it. Emma and I could move out by the end of the month." The words hit Marcus like ice water. He'd known this was coming. Of course he'd known. This was always supposed to be temporary, a bridge to get them back on their feet. They'd never discussed permanence, never defined what this was beyond a man helping 2 people who needed help. But somewhere along the way, in the pancake breakfasts and evening story times, in the way Emma had started calling him Uncle Marcus, and the way Sarah's smile made his chest feel too small for his heart, somewhere in all of that, temporary had started to feel like forever. "That's great," Marcus heard himself say, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. "That's really great, Sarah. You've worked so hard for this. You should be proud." Sarah's eyes searched his face, and he wondered what she saw there. The truth he was trying to hide, the disappointment he had no right to feel, the love he'd been too scared to acknowledge. "Is it great?" Sarah asked softly. "Because Emma cried herself to sleep last night after I told her. Because I've been lying awake, trying to figure out how to leave a place that feels more like home than anywhere I've ever lived. Because the thought of waking up in an apartment where you're not making terrible jokes in the kitchen makes me want to cry too." Marcus's breath caught. "Sarah, let me finish," she interrupted, her voice trembling now. 3 months ago, I was at the lowest point of my life. I was homeless, sick, terrified that I'd failed my daughter in every possible way. I knocked on your door because Emma saw something in you, some kindness that she recognized even when I was too broken to trust it. And you let us in, not just into your house, Marcus, into your life. You saved each other," Marcus said roughly. "You and Emma, you brought this house back to life. You made me remember what it felt like to be human again, to care about something beyond my own grief." "Then why are we talking about me leaving?" Sarah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Why are we pretending that what's happened here is just temporary kindness instead of—" She stopped, as if the words were too big, too frightening to say out loud. Marcus reached across the table, taking her hands in his. They were warm and real and trembling slightly. "Instead of what, Sarah? Say it, please." "Instead of love," she whispered. "Instead of family. Instead of home." The words hung in the air between them, shimmering with possibility and terror. Marcus felt his own eyes burning, felt the walls he'd built around his heart after his wife's death crumbling completely. "I'm scared," Marcus admitted. "I loved Sarah, my Sarah, so much. And when she died, I thought that was it. I thought I'd used up my lifetime supply of love, that I'd never feel this way about anyone again. But then you showed up in the rain with Emma, and you were brave and broken and beautiful, and somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you, both of you. And I'm terrified because what if I'm not enough? What if I can't protect you from the world? What if I lose you the way I lost her?" Sarah squeezed his hands tightly. "You can't protect anyone from the world, Marcus. Bad things happen. People get sick. Systems fail. Life is unfair and brutal, and sometimes it takes everything from you. But here's what I learned living on those streets. We're not meant to face it alone. We're meant to find each other in the darkness and hold on tight and help each other survive until morning comes." "I don't want you to leave," Marcus said, the words rushing out now. "I don't want to wake up in this house and not hear Emma singing in the shower or see your coffee cup on the counter. I don't want to go back to being alone, to just existing instead of living. I want this. I want us. If you'll have me." "If you think there's a chance—" Sarah was already moving around the table, and then she was in his arms, and they were both crying and laughing and holding each other like drowning people who'd finally found solid ground. "Yes," Sarah breathed against his neck. Yes to all of it. Yes to staying. Yes to us. Yes to building something real and permanent and ours. "Can I kiss you?" Marcus asked, pulling back just enough to see her face. "I've wanted to kiss you for weeks, but I didn't want to presume or make you uncomfortable or—" Sarah kissed him, silencing his rambling with her lips on his, soft and sure and tasting of coffee and hope. It was tentative at first, testing, but then it deepened into something that spoke of loneliness ending and futures beginning and the courage it takes to try again. "Mommy! Uncle Marcus!" Emma's voice from the stairs made them spring apart like guilty teenagers. "Are you kissing? Because Sophia at school said when grown-ups kiss it means they love each other, and I think that would be really, really good, because then we could all stay together forever, and I wouldn't have to move to that other apartment that doesn't have a garden or a room painted purple, like Uncle Marcus painted for me." Emma burst into the kitchen, her backpack bouncing, her face lit up with hope so bright it could have powered the entire city. She looked between them, reading the truth in their faces, in their still-held hands, in the tears and smiles they couldn't hide. "We're staying?" Emma asked, her voice small and scared and hopeful all at once. Marcus knelt down, opening his arms, and Emma crashed into them with the full force of her small body. Sarah knelt too, wrapping her arms around both of them, and they held each other in the morning light, streaming through the kitchen windows. "We're staying," Sarah confirmed. "If Uncle Marcus wants us to stay." "Forever?" Emma asked, looking up at Marcus with those impossibly large eyes that had first captured his heart on a rainy October night. Marcus looked at this child who wasn't his by blood, but had become his in every way that mattered. He looked at Sarah, whose name his late wife had shared, as if the universe had been preparing him all along for this second chance at love. He thought about the empty house this had been, and the home it had become. "Forever," Marcus said firmly, "for as long as forever lasts. You're my family now, both of you." Emma threw her arms around his neck. "I knew it," she said triumphantly. "I told Mommy on that rainy night that you were going to save us, but really, we were going to save each other. I'm very smart about these things." "You are," Marcus agreed, kissing the top of her head. "You're the smartest person I know." 6 months later, on a spring morning, when the Brownstones' garden was bursting with the tulips that Sarah had planted, and Emma was practicing her role for the school play in the living room, Marcus sat at the same kitchen table and wrote a letter to his late wife. "Dear Sarah, I don't know if you can read this, wherever you are. I don't know if heaven exists or if you're just gone, scattered into the same stardust we're all made of. But I need to tell you something, and I hope you understand. I fell in love again. Her name is Sarah too, and I know the coincidence is almost too much. She has a daughter named Emma, who's 8 years old and smarter than all of us combined. They were homeless when they found my door, or maybe when I found them. I'm still not sure which. I thought loving them was a betrayal of you, of us, of everything we built together. But then I realized something. You loved with your whole heart. You believed people should take care of each other. You would have been the first person to open our door that rainy night. You would have loved Emma's laugh and Sarah's strength and the way they brought this house back to life. So I don't think this is a betrayal. I think it's what you would have wanted for me, to stop existing and start living again, to find love in unexpected places, to become a father in all the ways that matter, even if it happened differently than we planned. I miss you every day. I always will. But I'm not drowning anymore. I'm swimming toward shore, and Sarah and Emma are swimming beside me, and together we're building something beautiful from the broken pieces we all carried. Thank you for teaching me how to love. Thank you for believing I was someone worth loving. And if you did send them to my door that night, if you had any hand in this miracle, thank you for that too. I'll love you always, Marcus. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in the box where he kept her wedding ring and the last birthday card she'd given him. Then he stood, wiped his eyes, and walked into the living room where Emma was reciting her lines, and Sarah was pretending to be a very enthusiastic audience member. They looked up when he entered, and Sarah's smile was like sunshine, and Emma patted the spot on the couch between them, and Marcus sat down in the space they'd saved for him. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with its usual chaos. Millions of people moving through millions of stories, some tragic and some triumphant, some ending and some just beginning. But inside this brownstone on Union Street, in this house that had been a tomb and became a home, 3 people who'd been lost had found each other. And that, Marcus thought as Emma resumed her dramatic tree monologue and Sarah's hand found his, was more than enough. That was everything. The end. Sometimes salvation comes on a rainy night. Sometimes it arrives in a whisper from a child who's learned to be brave. Sometimes it walks through a door you almost didn't open. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it stays forever.